traffic continues to increase on SR 500, so do the number of crashes. Listen to this. In the last 5 years, WashDOT says there have been nearly 400 crashes at just 2 intersections along the route.
That is about 1 crash every 4 days. And because of the high number, WashDOT is planning to make some changes. KGW's Lindsay Nadrich joins us live now from one of the problem intersections. Lindsay?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm here along Northeast 54th along State Route 500 where I found pieces of broken glass, and take a look at this, a part of somebody's bumper, likely remnants from one of the more than 200 crashes that happened right here at this intersection. The other problem spot is the intersection at 42nd Avenue. Those are the last 2 intersections that still have traffic lights. WashDOT is proposing 3 different plans to improve safety at both intersections, and now it wants your input. Since opening the discussion last week, hundreds of people have shared their feedback. Each option would impact traffic and safety differently.
They would change how folks can get to and from the roadway in the local area, and that's different than maybe people have the expectation of what they can do right now. So we want to make sure we talk with folks about those effects.
The safety improvements would obviously impact commuters, but it would also mean changes for homes and businesses in the area. Vancouver Public Schools said one option would increase bus driver costs because it would change their routes. People who live nearby are also concerned changes could push traffic into their neighborhoods. You can weigh in on the issue until May 25th. WashDOT says they'll wait until the online forum closes before making a decision. Now, if you do want to be part of that discussion, we've posted a link on our website. Just head to KGW.com. Reporting live, I'm Lindsay Nadrich. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Lindsay.